The respirator meter mounted on the corrugated wall of Hab block Gamma 7 clicks with mechanical precision, each metallic tick recording another measured inhalation. The brass dial face, worn smooth by anxious fingers, displays numbers in Gothic script, 14,847 breaths remaining until next coin insertion required. Below it, a child no older than 8 sits cross-legged on threadbare matting, her voice joining the morning chorus that echoes through narrow corridors. By his grace I breathe, by his will I labor, by his might I survive. Adults shuffle past in the pre-dawn gloom, clutching worn script tokens toward coin-fed vent grills that promise 4 hours of filtered atmosphere for the price of a meal. The queue moves with practiced efficiency, masks cupped in hands to preserve seals, eyes forward, voices kept to murmurs. Here, breath is currency and scripture combined. The meter bears an administratum hex seal and stamped legend, atmospheric tithe meter, property of the Imperium. It measures not compliance alone, but worth. This is the fundamental equation of Hive world existence. 18 billion souls compressed into 500 square kilometers of vertical city, stacked like cargo in a warehouse that reaches toward poisoned skies. Hive worlds are survival machines that convert human breath into war output, processing flesh and hope into the munitions and manpower that feed the Imperium's endless campaigns. Everything else is ornament. Scale clarifies intent. Floors become neighborhoods. Neighborhoods become nations stacked one atop another, bound by lifts, ducts, and quotas. The Hive's silhouette on the horizon resembles a serrated mountain, its skin patched with exhaust ports, its crown lost in toxic fog that glows with industrial phosphorescence. From under-hive sumps where air moves thick as soup, through manufacturing levels where chemical processes burn without rest, to noble spires where filtered atmosphere carries imported fragrances, the city operates as a single organism dedicated to extracting value from human suffering. Between the vent station and stairwell, a reclamation hopper mouths open, accepting organic matter only, according to faded signage, though glazed bones and plastic fragments vanish down its throat with equal efficiency. Waste becomes fuel for protein vats, refineries, the long chain that transforms leftovers into rations, rations into shifts. Across the corridor, a picked posting peels from damp brick, a scent lottery in sanctified font, depicting a guardsman with impossible shoulders raising a lasgun toward distant stars. Citizens read without moving their lips, as if secrecy might make promises more credible. Painted stencils mark every landing. On Ashfall Purge Day, seal doors and pray. The letters have been retraced so frequently, they rise like scar tissue. Behind steel plates, riveted resin strips wait to be torn free when sirens call for atmospheric cleansing. The catechisms declare purging saves. Lives? They do not specify whose lives require salvation or what payment the process demands. The child beneath the meter checks the brass dial with careful attention, having learned that mathematics determine mortality. Her mother counts script tokens with practiced fingers, calculating the day's breathing budget against accumulated debt to the Hive Authority's atmospheric division. The numbers never balance in the debtor's favor. An administratum field report posted on the sector's notice board documents yesterday's casualties with bureaucratic precision. 3 deaths by asphyxia in sublevel theta, classified as voluntary inefficiency, After investigation determined the deceased had failed to maintain adequate scrip reserves for atmospheric access. The classification carries legal weight, absolving authorities of compensation obligations to surviving family members, while routing the bodies to reclamation for processing. This machinery transforms suffocation into administrative efficiency through interconnected systems. Bureaucratic apparatus that converts death into ledger entries, physical infrastructure that monetizes every breath, and spiritual frameworks that sanctify systematic brutalization as divine necessity. Understanding how this operates requires examining each component, tracing chains of authority that bind 18 billion people to survival equations written in distant offices. The respirator meter clicks again, counting toward 0, while the child practices tomorrow's litany, and her mother calculates whether they can afford to breathe through the night. Someone in those distant offices calculates how much air this world deserves. Someone decides when doors must seal, and prayer becomes the only permitted sound. Their signatures ride the ducts like weather, arriving as edicts, audits, and purge schedules. We will follow that authority to its source and watch policy become architecture, mercy become variance, faith become ledger. The red bead advances. Worse is coming. The signatures that authorize those respirator meters descend from calculations performed in distant administratum complexes, where entire worlds reduce to spreadsheet entries, and human breath becomes another line item in imperial ledgers. The child's morning litany echoes policy, written 3 millennia ago, when segmentum solar planners discovered the mathematics of efficient extraction. To understand the machine that measures her inhalations, we must examine the cold arithmetic that built her prison. Hive worlds did not evolve through accident or necessity. They were mandated as instruments of imperial policy, designed to solve a fundamental logistical problem: how to meet munitions quotas across a galaxy, where transport costs lives and distance devours resources. The administratum's solution demonstrated elegant brutality. Concentrate populations near extraction sites, compress labor around manufactories, stack billions within walking distance of their workstations, sprawled wastes fuel, scattered settlements require oversight personnel, vertical cities eliminate inefficiencies through calculated human compression. The mathematics remain archived in sub-basement vaults, their parchment margins annotated with tithe projections calculate to the decimal. 800 million tons of refined adamantium annually, 12 million las rounds manufactured daily, 40 armored hulls completed each standard year. Human conscription quotas of 1.2% of adult population per decade, weighted toward households with manageable debt ratios. These numbers drove architectural decisions with theological authority, transforming abstract policy into ferrocrete foundations and plasteel walls. The tithe system operates through interlocking quotas that cascade from segmentum command through sector administration to planetary governors, each level extracting administrative fees while passing obligations downward. Mineral extraction targets demand specific population densities to maintain excavation schedules. Manufacturing quotas require concentrated labor pools, operating synchronized shifts around chronometer discipline. Conscription demands breeding populations large enough to sustain recruitment without compromising production capacity. The ledgers permit no waste, including wasted space or inefficient atmospheric distribution. This systematic extraction required legal framework to transform environmental destruction into sanctified policy. The Guild Compact, established in the 37th millennium and blessed by Ministorum decree, partitions ownership of necessary functions among hereditary houses. Atmospheric processing rights became theological privileges granted to manufacturing guilds in exchange for increased tithe compliance. Air transforms from planetary commons into commodity, licensed through coin-fed dispensers that make breathing an economic transaction, while industrial processes ensure unfiltered atmosphere kills within hours. The compact contains the blessed variance clause that every clerk learns by heart, cited in margin notes with small halos drawn in ink. Within prescribed parameters, deviation from projected survival rates becomes providential rather than culpable. When atmospheric processes malfunction and hundreds die through toxic exposure, casualties become acceptable variance within Imperial tolerance parameters. When food riots result in mass deaths, violence transforms into population optimization through natural selection. Bureaucratic errors become miracles. Administrative incompetence becomes providence. The mathematics sanctify systematic failure as divine intervention. This creates the fundamental contradiction defining Hive world existence. Imperial doctrine preaches human dignity as sacred principle, while Imperial ledgers treat human bodies as production components with calculated replacement costs. Ministorum sermons declare each soul precious in the Emperor's sight, while administratum actuaries determine acceptable casualty rates for maintaining quotas. The Lectitio Divinitatus proclaims humanity's divine destiny, while Munitorum intake forms classify conscripts as expendable material with standardized replacement schedules. Environmental degradation follows as planned consequence rather than unfortunate byproduct. Industrial processes that extract adamantium from planetary crust release sulfur compounds into atmospheric processes designed for standard oxygen-nitrogen mixtures. Chemical refineries, manufacturing promethium additives, vent chlorine derivatives through exhaust systems calibrated for water vapor. Purification machinery struggles with chemical loads that increase annually as production expands, corroding metal components and human lung tissue with equal efficiency. The air becomes poison not through accident, but through calculated acceptance that atmospheric purity costs more than atmospheric processing. These policies required physical implementation through architectural systems designed to enforce compliance rather than ensure survival. The towers rising from bedrock represent mathematics made manifest in corridors that channel movement, chambers that regulate access, and ducts that meter life itself. Every habstack placement, every ventilation shaft diameter, every stairwell width reflects calculations that treat human bodies as cargo requiring efficient storage and processing. The child beneath the respirator meter inherits architecture built from quotas that preceded her birth by millennia. Breathing air processed through systems designed to extract maximum value from human desperation. Her morning prayers echo policy documents that authorize her suffocation when coin cannot meet meter. How does policy become prison when built in metal and stone? Through careful engineering that transforms survival into submission, breath into currency, hope into conscription quota. What happens when the air itself becomes a weapon of control? We descend the towers to examine blueprints written in flesh and steel. those distant signatures that transform into physical reality through architectural systems designed to enforce the mathematics of extraction. Policy becomes prison when abstract quotas require concrete implementation, when ledger entries demand corridors that channel movement and chambers that meter survival. The towers rising from Gamma 7's foundations represent 3 millennia of systematic engineering, each level functioning as an organ in a vast control apparatus that processes human lives into imperial resources. The spire crown houses atmospheric intake manifolds that draw external air through purification arrays designed for standard planetary atmospheres, not the chemical soup that industrial processes have created. Blessed ceramite filtration chambers struggle against sulfur compounds and metallic particulates, their machine spirits choking on poisons while robed. Attendants recite maintenance litanies. The processed air descends through primary distribution arteries, losing purity with each branching junction as corroded seals leak contamination back into filtered streams. Vent columns drop like drilled shafts through the hive's body, each a stack of mechanisms, fan cages, sluice valves, baffle gates, pressure bells that ring when atmospheric balance slips. Vent column theta serves 14 hab stacks through distribution networks marked with technical plates, noting gasket sets by serial number and maintenance intervals by saint days. The ledger beside its access hatch lists overdue work orders in red grease, most bearing identical notation, parts reallocated to promethium canning quotas by Guild Compact Authority. Maintenance Crew 42. A signs for Theta's upkeep, their designation stenciled on a locker with flaking paint. Their docket records 18 closures this quarter without replacement gaskets, each achieved by cannibalizing non-critical seals from neighboring ducts, while praying the blessed variance clause covers what mathematics cannot. They file hazard notices to Vox addresses that return automated pieties about diligence and faith. The column breathes anyway, but with a catch in its throat that grows more pronounced each cycle. Hab stacks lace the vertical cavity like ribs, each floor repeating patterns demanded by quota, sleep tiers, meal alcoves, latrine runnels, and at corridor ends the brass face of an air tithe meter. The meters speak the hive's grammar in numbers, insert script, receive hours of filtered atmosphere. Script dispensers mounted beside vent grills connect through data cables to productivity cogitators that calculate atmospheric credits based on manufacturing output. Workers who exceed quotas breathe easier. Those who fall behind face debt accumulation that compounds with interest, calculated by machine spirits, programmed for extraction rather than survival. Between levels lie dead zones, where pressure differentials and chemical densities make ordinary breathing lethal within minutes. Reclamation hoppers yawn at these intersections, their enamel signs reading, "Organic matter only," though glazed bones and plastic fragments vanish down their gullets with equal efficiency. The theology justifying this mixture declares all matter sacred to the Omnissiah, suitable for transformation through blessed mechanical processes. Bone becomes protein paste, plastic feeds refineries, human remains disappear into cycles that convert death into commodity without distinction or waste. Lift wells pierce the hive like spears, their cages rattling past faded ascent lottery placards depicting guardsmen with impossible shoulders raising lasguns toward distant stars. The placards promise elevated service opportunities for exceptional citizens, though careful examination reveals surnames repeating across multiple postings, suggesting either remarkable family dedication or systematic documentation. Fraud. Zoning theology transforms living space into spiritual discipline through regulations that maximize extraction efficiency. Incense hours require burning sanctified compounds that mask industrial odors while consuming oxygen reserves. Penance shifts mandate overnight assignments that prevent adequate rest while maintaining production schedules. Sleeping positions face ministorum regulation, designating cardinal directions as spiritually appropriate, forcing families to arrange bedding according to architectural constraints that prioritize space utilization over comfort. Monthly Ashfall Purge Day represents the system's most elegant control mechanism. Ventilation systems reverse flow direction, drawing contaminated air from manufacturing levels through residential areas before expulsion. Citizens receive orders to seal doors and pray during atmospheric cleansing. Technical specifications reveal the purge's lethal potential through missing components that were never intended to remain in place. Theta's backup gaskets, essential for preventing toxic leakage during reversed flow, were requisitioned for industrial applications months ago. Crew 42A continues operations with improvised repairs, listening through stethoscopes pressed to duct skin for the whistle that means leaks too small to justify shutdown under quota pressure. They patch with tape and prayer, then log fixes that violate safety protocols while maintaining compliance appearance. In their kit, folded paper lists gaskets by size with notation. Expected delivery date unknown. Why do reclamation hoppers process both bone and industrial waste? Because systems designed to extract value from all available matter cannot distinguish between human remains and manufacturing byproducts. What technical failures make cleansing lethal? Missing seals that create controlled failure points, transforming safety procedures into population management tools. When atmospheric reversal meets corroded barriers and air thick with industrial poison. The architectural machinery examined from above translates into mourning agony in Tier 12 Hab block, where abstract quotas become empty stomachs, and ledger mathematics determine whether families breathe through the night. Here, the vent columns and atmospheric processes reveal their human cost through daily routine that transforms survival into labor with mechanical precision. Dawn arrives with klaxon wail at 0400 local, the sound calibrated to penetrate sleep while avoiding frequencies that might damage delicate manufacturing equipment. Citizens rise from sleeping mats arranged according to ministorum regulation, facing cardinal directions that maximize space utilization. The metallic tang of recycled oxygen mingles with the sweet decay of yesterday's rations as families prepare for another cycle of extraction. Shift queues form with practiced efficiency, workers clutching identification tokens, bearing guild authentication stamps and debt tracking codes. Ration dispensation occurs through automated hoppers that recognize palm prints and dispense corpse starch wafers according to overnight productivity calculations. Each grey wafer bears pressed seals indicating protein source, though recycling symbols suggest complex supply chains that transform yesterday's casualties into today's sustenance. The taste combines solvent and salt with undertones that families learn not to question. Marta Korvek, Line Worker Classification 7, counts script tokens while calculating survival arithmetic that never balances. She earns 47 tokens per standard shift at Press Station Gamma 12. Atmospheric access costs 12 tokens for 8-hour periods. Ration allocation requires 23 tokens daily for family unit consisting of 2 adults, 1 child, and 1 elderly dependent. Medical supplies purchased on credit from Guild Apothecary accumulate interest at rates calculated by machine spirits programmed for extraction. The deficit becomes prayer. Debt compounds with mathematical certainty. Following Marta through pre-shift preparation reveals body as machine theology, implemented through ritual that sanctifies industrial injury as spiritual discipline. Blessed Finger Guards manufactured from ceramite protect digits required for quota compliance while exposing wrists to chemical burns that mark dedication. Tendons receive tape applications preventing joint separation during repetitive motions, applied with prayers to machine spirits inhabiting press mechanisms. She pockets needle prayers and contraband Elcho sticks for the journey ahead. Press Hall Gamma 12 operates through synchronized violence, its machine spirits demanding flesh offerings in exchange for manufactured output. Workers assume positions beside presses that stamp adamantium components with metronomic precision, their bodies becoming extensions of mechanisms that tolerate no deviation from rhythm. Chemical lubricants coat every surface, creating atmosphere thick with metallic particles that coat lung tissue while blessing manufactured goods with industrial sanctity. The noise has weight, pressing against eardrums and vibrating through bone marrow. Coping mechanisms develop through necessity, creating shadow economies within system constraints. Needle prayers involve sharp implements for bloodletting that releases pressure while demonstrating penitential dedication. Contraband LHO sticks circulate through networks, trading medical supplies for momentary chemical relief, their smoke masking industrial odors. Workers whisper stories of Ascent lottery winners elevated to service, their families receiving notifications about beloved relatives serving the Emperor in distant theaters. No one mentions why elevated families receive compensation resembling death benefits. Respirator hour regulations mandate mask wearing during atmospheric transfers when purification systems cycle contaminated air through residential areas. Enforcers monitor compliance through visual inspection and random breath analysis, their data slates displaying hourly infraction quotas requiring specific violation rates to justify departmental funding. They patrol with mechanical precision, checking seals, listening for leaks, citing codes from memory. Their quotas determine justice through mathematics rather than mercy. Environmental conditions reflect design choices, prioritizing industrial output over human comfort. Constant noise from manufacturing operations makes rest impossible, its frequency spectrum calculated to maintain alertness while preventing deep sleep. Press mechanisms operate in overlapping shifts, ensuring continuous operation, their mechanical voices creating sound walls that penetrate hab block partitions. Silence becomes luxury reserved for the dead and auditors whose presence temporarily suspends operations. During afternoon break, Marta passes vent column Theta, where maintenance crew 42A kneels beside access hatches, stethoscopes pressed to flaking metal, searching for tremors indicating seal failure. One holds gasket template cut from ration carton. It fits. It will not last. They exchange calculations that weigh risk against quota pressure, signing maintenance logs with names that blur under industrial grime. Missing gaskets requisitioned for promethium canning create vulnerabilities that grow more pronounced each cycle. The air tithe meter recalculates distribution as productivity cogitators update atmospheric allowances. Machine stoppages trigger automatic reductions applied across residential blocks. Citizens absorb cuts through personal rationing, parents subtracting from their own reserves rather than children's allocation. The mathematics of survival operate through sacrifice that compounds across generations. Who enforces breath rationing, and how do quotas determine justice? Where do ascent lottery winners actually go? The answers emerge through examination of authority structures that transform survival into compliance, hope into conscription, elevation into processing serving imperial needs, while maintaining population control through systematic terror disguised as opportunity. The quotas that determine Marta's atmospheric allowance require enforcement through overlapping authorities that transform survival into compliance through systematic terror disguised as divine order. Behind the respirator meters and vent columns stand three hierarchies that share jurisdiction over human breath, each claiming sacred mandate while operating through bureaucratic mechanisms designed to extract value from desperation. Law becomes liturgy when authority sanctifies brutalization as necessary salvation. Adeptus Arbites maintain imperial law through black carapace and absolute verdict. They patrol in small numbers, arriving like judgment itself, their aquila insignia bearing authority that spans star systems. Arbites enforce regulations written in distant offices, treating planetary populations as imperial resources, requiring management through standardized codes. Their concern extends to tithe compliance, heretical activity, and sedition defined broadly enough to encompass breathing irregularities during loyalty recitations. They read from the Book of Judgment and make buildings quiet. Hive enforcers fill the gaps through municipal collection, their leather coats bearing guild authentication stamps and data slates displaying daily infraction targets, broken down by violation type and residential block. They operate through mathematics rather than justice, their quotas calculated by machine spirits, programmed for revenue generation rather than crime prevention. Atmospheric compliance citations, ration distribution irregularities, and workplace efficiency deviations generate fines that fund departmental operations while ensuring steady revenue streams. They fine, they seize, they tally. Ministorum maintains moral compliance through medici bishops who diagnose sin through physiological examination. Red robes conceal augmetic sensors calibrated to detect chemical traces indicating contraband consumption, unauthorized prayer variations, or insufficient penitential dedication. They transform medical examination into spiritual audit, treating bodies as texts requiring interpretation through sacred methodology. Faith closes the loop the ledger opens each day. Purity audit sequence begins with klaxon announcement at 0630 local, requiring citizens to report for examination at designated processing stations. Marta joins queues arranged by residential block and productivity classification. Her identification token displaying debt ratios and compliance history through embedded data crystals. The line moves with practiced dread, palms extended for inspection by robed figures whose brass masks emit mechanical breathing sounds. Chemical burns receive examination for proper industrial dedication, their absence suggesting insufficient commitment to manufacturing quotas. Inspectors read solvent traces like scripture, interpreting acid scarring as evidence of proper devotion, while smooth skin indicates potential theft or unauthorized moonlighting. Tongues undergo inspection for contraband stains, revealing elotar and stimulant residue. The Medici bishops using blessed magnification lenses to detect violations, measured in molecular traces. Lung capacity measurement occurs through breathing apparatus connected to cogitator banks that analyze respiratory patterns for irregularities suggesting heretical activity. Medici bishops interpret wheeze patterns as spiritual symptoms, diagnosing insufficient faith through shallow breathing and excessive devotion through hyperventilation. The machine spirits whisper measurements, while robed figures make notations in ledgers bound with human skin, their quills scratching sin into permanence with inhuman patience. Sanction hierarchies escalate from fines through physical punishment to servitorization, each level calculated to extract maximum value while maintaining population control. Minor infractions result in atmospheric credit reductions that force families to choose between breathing and eating. Moderate violations trigger work assignment modifications, placing citizens in hazardous positions with reduced safety equipment. Major offenses culminate in lobotomization procedures that transform thinking beings into mechanical servants whose augmetic implants ensure perfect compliance. Inside Precinct Station Gamma 7, enforcer ledgers glow green with cogitator cross-references, linking residential blocks to target infraction ranges. Each block requires specific violation rates to justify departmental funding, creating incentives for citation discovery, regardless of actual infractions. Wall charts display atmospheric compliance quotas, requiring minimum numbers of respirator violations per shift cycle. Squad leaders brief to quota first, safety second, their pay tied to numbers that hunger for human suffering. Audit servitors drift through shadows like mechanical judgment, their skull-mounted sensors recording every conversation and measuring compliance rates with instruments calibrated to detect hesitation during brutalization procedures. Barbed quills extrude to annotate delays, while Vox Scratch transcribes reluctance into deficiency codes. Enforcers who demonstrate insufficient enthusiasm for quota achievement receive reassignment to hazardous positions or augmetic modification, ensuring future dedication. Even the hardest club hand speaks softly when skull drones linger overhead. Sealed orders arrive through pneumatic dispatch, their Aquila authentication and guild sigils bearing classification beyond standard enforcer access. One parchment bears 3 lines and terrible precision. Ashfall Purge authorization granted. Vent column Theta. Pre-cleansing protocol required. Distribution lists include enforcer squads, maintenance crew 42A, and ministorum chapel wardens tasked with prayer coordination. No explanation accompanies the instruction, only margins filled with initials that authorize systematic death through bureaucratic efficiency. Doctrinal justification operates through theological framework that transforms oppression into salvation through circular logic designed to resist questioning. Order enables tithe through population control that maximizes extraction efficiency. Tithe sustains war through resource allocation, feeding imperial campaigns across galaxy-spanning fronts. War preserves humanity through violence, protecting civilization from Xenos corruption and heretical deviation. The syllables fit any tragedy because they were engineered for that purpose. Martyr receives atmospheric credit reduction for insufficient chemical burns on her palms, the Medici bishop diagnosing spiritual weakness through examination of work-softened hands. The fine consumes tomorrow's breathing budget, forcing calculations that weigh survival against compliance, while her family learns economy in darkness where breath accrues interest. She counts coins she will not have while watching meters tick toward zero. Why does Theta require pre-cleansing before the general purge? Because missing gaskets create controlled failure points that transform safety procedures into population management tools, requiring preliminary atmospheric processing to ensure maximum efficiency during systematic elimination. How do families survive when fines consume their air rations? Through sacrifice, compounding across generations, debt accumulating with mathematical certainty, and hope that becomes conscription when survival demands elevation to service whose true destination remains classified beyond citizen access levels. The fines that consume Martyr's breathing budget drive families into shadow economies that exist beneath the ledgers, where survival becomes another form of taxation collected by entrepreneurs who understand desperation as opportunity. When official systems fail to provide necessities at survivable rates, black markets emerge to extract value from the gap between compliance and death. Here, the price of not dying becomes currency measured in blood, components, and compromised futures. Oxygen canisters circulate through networks operated by gangs who control access to manufacturing districts, where industrial accidents create surplus atmospheric equipment. Portable breathing apparatus intended for hazardous maintenance work disappears from inventory through theft, requisition fraud, and strategic equipment failure that requires immediate replacement, while original units vanish into shadow markets. The canisters bear guild authentication stamps filed smooth to prevent tracing, their contents cut with industrial gases that extend volume while reducing effectiveness. Dealers offer regulators manufactured from refaced plumbing couplers, each sale carrying disclaimers scrawled in fading ink. No guarantees, no refunds, variance is blessed. Buyers nod because certainty costs more than breath. Water brokerage operates through parallel systems that transform liquid necessity into commodity speculation. Gang-controlled pumps tap industrial cooling systems, processing chemical-laden water through improvised filtration that removes visible contamination while leaving molecular poisons that accumulate in tissue over decades. Brokers sell hydration by the liter from waxed cups stamped with saints, their prices fluctuating according to atmospheric humidity and industrial demand. The water tastes like continued employment and leaves metal traces that coat the tongue with industrial benediction. Scriptlock systems bind wages to single vendors through contractual arrangements that eliminate consumer choice while maximizing extraction efficiency. Martyr's identification token routes every earned scrip to designated guild stores, where prices obey no law except quota pressure. Promissory heir, chits represent atmospheric credit extended against future earnings, their thin vellum bearing Aquila stamps and expiration dates timed to purge schedules. Unused chits die at midnight, their value zeroed by cogitators that never sleep. The system ensures that delay becomes theft, while the machine accuses in silence. Under the stairwell of Block 12C, An underground apothecary maintains a counter of stained plasteel beside a shrine to the Omnisire, decorated with stripped servitor fingers. He cuts stims with caffeine dust and powdered ration wafer, marketing them as shift stretchers that add 4 hours to human capacity, while subtracting years from human duration. Lung candies containing mild bronchodilators and mentholated antiseptic spirits open airways long enough to meet quotas while masking symptoms of chemical poisoning. He warns that candies dry the throat and increase tear-out risk when masks seal too tight. He does not lie about consequences. He offers store credit with interest denominated in hours of future breath. Gang taxation at Theta's borders exploits geographic vulnerability through protection schemes disguised as service provision. The Ascensionists control checkpoints where citizens traveling between residential blocks face toll collection by armed groups claiming territorial authority. Gang representatives offer ascent guarantees, promising elevated service opportunities in exchange for payment in mechanical parts, specialized labor, or family members suitable for processing. The contracts bear forged authentication stamps and testimonials from elevated citizens whose current status remains unverifiable through official channels. They twist imperial promises of elevation into brutal local rackets that feed on manufactured hope. Marta faces the choice the system designed her to make, standing between competing necessities that reduce survival to arithmetic. Extra oxygen canisters for her elderly dependent cost 47 tokens, exactly matching her daily wage, while Ministorum tithes demand 23 tokens to maintain spiritual compliance and avoid purity audit sanctions. The mathematics permit no solution except debt accumulation or family reduction through death that transforms burden into relief. She chooses the canister. The Ministorum tithe collector notes the deficit in neat handwriting, while his ledger monitors giving history with mechanical precision. The machine records another soul in arrears. Critical vulnerability emerges through maintenance crew, 42A's desperate bargain with gang suppliers who understand that system components possess value beyond their intended function. Essential gaskets required for atmospheric seal integrity during reversed flow become currency in exchanges that prioritize immediate survival over systemic safety. Crew members produce 2 intact gasket rings, Theta-compatible, stamped with serials intended for backup seating during purge operations. The gang factor weighs them like fruit before offering crates of nutrient slurry and lift tokens. The foreman hesitates, glancing toward column hatches where stenciled warnings about purge reversals peel from paint, then nods. Trade completed. He signs receipts with grease-smeared thumbprints, as if legitimacy could be conjured through ritual. The rings disappear into burlap sacks labeled donations. Atmospheric foreshadowing intensifies through technical communications that reveal growing system instability, while official channels maintain operational confidence. Static-filled Vox warnings about purge protocol modifications crackle through cheap speakers, their transmission quality suggesting equipment failure or deliberate obfuscation. In machine chapels, tech priests raise cog-toothed hands while reciting maintenance catechisms, their augmetic voices expressing mechanical anxiety about atmospheric reversal procedures, scheduled despite missing components. Between prayers, they whisper data. Reverse cycle stress exceeds tolerance without backup rings. Leak probability triples. Exposure zones expand unpredictably. They log concerns in archives that respond with electronic acknowledgements, the digital equivalent of bureaucratic shrugs. The economic and mechanical threads converge toward disaster through systematic degradation that transforms survival economics into death logistics. Citizens purchase contaminated air while trading away seals that prevent contamination. Families choose between breathing and eating, while mechanical systems fail through component theft driven by starvation. Gang taxation extracts value from desperation, while official taxation demands compliance regardless of capacity. Debt spiral mechanics tighten around these warnings like nooses, converting fines to credit penalties that increase retail prices at script-locked vendors, forcing purchases on credit that pledges future heir allotments as collateral. Voxcasters announce Ashfall Purge scheduling with mechanical precision, their speakers crackling through atmospheric interference that suggests system degradation beyond routine maintenance. Pre-cleansing protocols require citizen compliance, while technical specifications remain classified beyond maintenance access levels. Crew 42A receives orders to implement procedures using components they have already traded for survival. Their work logs documenting completion through improvisation that violates safety standards, while maintaining bureaucratic appearance of compliance. By evening, Marta's new canister hisses gently beside sleeping mats, while her child breathes evenly for the first time in days. On the other side of corrugated walls, vent column Theta coughs with mechanical distress. Above, in offices that will never smell of solvent, clerks advance ashfall schedules by one day to accommodate convoy timing, while marking Theta for pre-cleansing protocols. The column inhales with growing difficulty, and the Hive waits with mechanical patience. What happens when survival economics sabotage life support systems? Who breathes when the machines fail? The answers approach through convergence of desperation and mechanical failure, creating conditions where survival taxation becomes death taxation, collected through atmospheric reversal that transforms protection into elimination while maintaining official documentation of procedural compliance. The convergence arrives at midnight local time, with ashfall sirens wailing 3 hours ahead of schedule, their metallic shriek cutting through industrial noise while enforcers emerge from concealed positions with practiced efficiency. The early activation catches families unprepared, children still sleeping on mats while adults fumble for respirators purchased from black market suppliers. Voxcasters crackle to life with compliance hymns that mask the sound of stairwell seals engaging, their electronic voices declaring purification, blessed while magnetic locks engage with finality that echoes through corridors like coffin lids closing. 00:03. Vent column. Theta shudders as atmospheric processors reverse flow direction, their machine spirits groaning through mechanical transformation that forces contaminated air from manufacturing levels through residential ducts. The grinding sound penetrates walls as fan assemblies rotate against design specifications, their bearings screaming protest, while pressure differentials build beyond safe parameters. Missing gaskets traded by maintenance crew 42A for survival create failure points that leak corrosive ash into corridors, where families huddle behind sealed doors. Yellow vapor seeps through cracks like malevolent incense, carrying the taste of dissolved metal and chemical burns that eat flesh from bone. 00:05. Respirator hour becomes death sentence as counterfeit masks purchased from underground suppliers dissolve under chemical assault they were never designed to resist. The acid-laced atmosphere eats through improvised filtration materials, while children's equipment fails catastrophically, their smaller masks cracking under pressure that adult gear barely contains. Marta watches her daughter's respirator seal split along stress fractures, the brass fittings corroding in real time, while yellow gas pours through gaps. She tears fabric from her own clothing to improvise patches while the child's breathing becomes labored, gasping through barriers that offer hope rather than protection. 00:08. Crowd surge begins toward coin-fed emergency vents as families abandon sealed rooms for atmospheric access that promises salvation through payment. The mechanisms jam under demand, their coin slots clogged with corroded scrip, while desperate hands pound brass faces that reflect terror in polished surfaces. Panic spreads through mathematical progression as oxygen levels drop and carbon dioxide builds to toxic concentrations. Enforcer clubs maintain order through systematic brutalization, their leather coats protecting them from chemical exposure while civilians choke on atmosphere that burns throat tissue with each inhalation. They beat compliance into crowds while wearing military-grade filtration that transforms them into mechanical demons, dispensing order through violence. 00:12. Adeptus Arbiters establish quarantine perimeter around affected blocks, their black carapace gleaming with chemical-resistant coating, while servo skulls project kill zones marked with Aquila authorization. Citizens attempting escape face bolt rounds, fired without warning, their bodies dropping into pools of corrosive condensation, while Vox casters announce containment protocols designed to prevent contamination spread. The Arbites maintain perfect discipline, executing containment procedures with mechanical precision, while families die behind barriers designed to protect the Hive from its own purification system. 00:17. Gang ascent contractors emerge from concealed positions, offering emergency shaft access through vertical passages that bypass official quarantine. The Ascensionists demand everything families possess in exchange for elevation promises that sound like salvation while representing another form of processing. Stampede begins toward under-maintained lift passages as hundreds surge through corridors never designed for mass evacuation. Support structures collapse under human weight, while chemical atmosphere eats through safety cables and structural joints. Bodies fall through gaps in flooring that opens like hungry mouths, their screams echoing through shafts that become vertical graveyards. 00:22. Tech priests attempt emergency repairs while chanting binary hymns to machine spirits that have already abandoned their mechanical flesh. Red-robed figures array votive lamps along Theta's service ring, their augmetic limbs whirring as they access sparking control panels. A servo skull, its cranial case engraved with maintenance prayers, is guided into a burned relay junction to bridge critical failure. The skull spasms, optics whitening, then fuses into the panel with electrical discharge that jump-starts failing systems. Power returns in jagged surge that ignites solvent-soaked corridors where industrial chemicals have accumulated over decades. Fire spreads through ventilation networks, consuming oxygen while producing toxic smoke that completes what chemical purging began. 00:31. Purge cycle completes with atmospheric vacuum that tears away protective gear while survivors huddle in spaces too small for human dignity. The sudden pressure drop creates wind that strips respirators from faces and pulls breath from lungs, while emergency systems engage to normalize atmospheric conditions. Silence falls like judgment over corridors, filled with bodies that steam in cooling air. The machines breathe again with mechanical satisfaction, while human breathing stops forever. Vent column. Theta settles into rhythm that suggests successful maintenance completion. 0040. Audit servitors descend. Through cleared passages like mechanical angels of enumeration, their skull-mounted sensors recording casualty statistics with instruments calibrated for precision rather than mercy. They photograph bodies from multiple angles, while cogitators calculate mass-to-volume ratios, useful for reclamation processing. Data slates record family units reduced to individual components, their identification tokens scanned for debt transfer to surviving relatives. The servitors work with mechanical efficiency, treating human remains as inventory requiring proper documentation. This represents system rebalancing rather than malfunction, population optimization through managed catastrophe that maintains official documentation of procedural compliance while achieving quotas written in distant offices. The early siren activation, the missing gaskets, the counterfeit equipment, the gang coordination. Every component operates according to specification when specification includes acceptable variance that encompasses systematic elimination disguised as atmospheric maintenance. How are the dead processed, and what ledgers record their value? Was this malfunction or managed population reduction? The answers emerge through examination of reclamation systems that process human remains with industrial efficiency while maintaining official documentation that transforms systematic murder into bureaucratic variance, blessed by authorities who calculate acceptable losses with theological precision. The silence that follows Theta's purge breaks with the clatter of stretcher legs and the hiss of sterilant sprayed in measured arcs. Body crews arrive in red aprons bearing guild reclamation stamps, their movements choreographed through repetition that transforms horror into routine labor. They work without conversation, sorting remains by mass and composition, while portable scales calculate biomass totals that feed directly into production quotas. Audit servitors hover overhead, their skull-mounted sensors recording every measurement with instruments calibrated for precision rather than mercy. Reclamation hoppers positioned at corridor intersections accept organic matter with mechanical hunger, their enamel throats designed to process whatever feeds the Hive's digestive system. The early mystery resolves through industrial theology. Bone becomes calcium phosphate for food supplements, while plastic components feed chemical refineries that produce synthetic materials. Human remains and manufacturing waste merge in blessed cycles that waste nothing, sanctify everything, and maintain production schedules that treat death as raw material rather than tragedy. The hoppers consume with equal efficiency because the machine spirits inhabiting their mechanisms recognize no distinction between organic protein and synthetic polymers when both serve the Omnissiah's greater design. Cogitators mounted on processing units convert mass measurements into ration credits through algorithms that calculate nutritional yield with theological precision. The mathematics operate with mechanical satisfaction. 3,184 souls processed yield 62.1 metric tons of organic matter and 14.7 tons of synthetic salvage. Protein paste production receives biomass allocation, while metallic implants and personal effects feed manufacturing streams. The ledgers balance as death transforms into commodity through blessed industrial sacrament that projects 178,000 supplemental meal units across 5 production cycles. Survivor interviews reveal system logic through testimonials that demonstrate successful conditioning rather than system failure. Jorik Thane, press worker classification 4, receives citation for riotous motion during emergency procedures, his fine calculated to consume next week's atmospheric allocation while teaching proper compliance during crisis management. He signs the violation notice with trembling fingers while explaining that panic represents insufficient faith in Imperial protection systems. The enforcer nods approvingly while recording testimony that transforms survival instinct into spiritual deficiency, requiring correction through economic penalty. Ministorum Chaplain Vex declares the purge merciful population management that prevents larger tragedy through precise intervention, blessed by divine providence. Standing beside reclamation hoppers that process his former parishioners, he explains theological necessity. Overpopulation strains atmospheric systems beyond sustainable capacity, creating conditions that would kill thousands through gradual suffocation rather than hundreds through efficient processing. His sermon transforms systematic murder into theological necessity through doctrine that sanctifies brutalization as salvation while maintaining production quotas that serve humanity's greater survival. Enforcer Sergeant Kane exceeded quota by 17% during containment operations, his club work contributing to casualty statistics that surpass projected targets while maintaining order through exemplary violence. He receives commendation notation in personnel files while explaining crowd control methodology that prioritizes compliance over survival when both objectives conflict. His testimony describes optimal force application that achieves population reduction goals while preventing property damage that might interfere with reclamation processing. The mathematics of brutalization become performance metrics that reward efficiency in human elimination. Administratum Incident Report arrives through pneumatic dispatch bearing, Aquila authentication and classification stamps restricting distribution to authorized personnel. The parchment documents losses as within budgeted variance, noting that bodies processed through reclamation systems offset projected ration shortfalls that would have caused larger unrest within acceptable timeframes. Marginalia reveals critical intelligence. Ascension alignment protocols scheduled to activate 48 hours post-purge, their timing calculated to harvest grateful survivors whose trauma creates optimal recruitment conditions. The bureaucratic euphemism conceals systematic conscription drives that exploit survivor psychology through promises of elevation that transform grief into military service. Families who lost members during purification receive priority consideration for Ascent lottery participation, their desperation channeled toward Imperial Guard intake facilities, where mourning becomes martial dedication. Quota bands specify 9 to 12% uplift from affected blocks, targeting audit-compliant survivors, low-debt households, and mechanically skilled miners through coordination between Munitorum intake, chaplaincy consolation, and transit authority. Processing statistics reveal the purge's true efficiency through numbers that reduce human tragedy to industrial output. Theta's casualties yield sufficient biomass to supplement ration production for 3 standard weeks, while reducing atmospheric demand by margins that improve air quality ratings across adjacent residential blocks. The mathematics demonstrate successful rebalancing that maintains Hive functionality through calculated elimination disguised as atmospheric maintenance, while generating resources that offset operational costs through blessed recycling. Marta surveys empty sleeping spaces where neighbors once arranged bedding according to ministorum regulation, their absence creating additional room that improves compliance with density requirements while reducing competition for atmospheric resources. She breathes easier through filters that no longer strain against demand, though the improvement tastes of metal and carries undertones that families learn not to question. The system rebalances through subtraction that calls itself salvation. Who calculates budgeted variance and defines acceptable death rates? What is ascension alignment beyond bureaucratic euphemism? The answers emerge through examination of administrative hierarchies that transform human lives into statistical abstractions while maintaining recruitment systems that convert grief into military service through promises of elevation that lead to processing facilities where mourning becomes conscription. The signatures that authorized Theta's purge originate 17 levels above the reclamation processing, in Mid-Hive Administratum Complex Beta 7, where endless data slate archives stretch beyond human sight, and calculation servitors chant enumeration catechisms with mechanical devotion. Here, atmospheric allocation becomes mathematical theology, practiced by clerks who transform human breath into statistical abstractions while maintaining ledgers that balance life against death with computational precision. The office that decides your air operates through sacred arithmetic that treats population as variable in equations solved through systematic elimination. Adept Thalian Vex presides over atmospheric resource allocation through cogitator banks that project warfront demands across multiple star systems, their data streams translating Imperial Guard casualties into planetary tithe requirements with algorithmic efficiency. Wall-mounted pict screens display ammunition consumption rates, vehicle attrition statistics, and manpower replacement schedules that cascade through administrative hierarchies until they become atmospheric quotas enforced through coin-fed dispensers. The mathematics operate with divine authority. Increased warfront intensity requires expanded conscription. Expanded conscription demands population surplus. Population surplus necessitates resource optimization through calculated reduction. Data servitors hum in endless rows, their augmetic limbs clicking across illuminated slates, while performing calculations that reduce entire worlds to spreadsheet entries. Each flicker of cogitator light represents lives consumed by imperial hunger, their binary hymns celebrating efficiency metrics that transform mass death into production optimization. Segmentum command requisitions cascade downward through administrative layers, each demand cross-referenced against planetary output, while atmospheric purity becomes function of strategic value rather than human necessity. On illuminated wall charts, Theta's purge appears as successful correction, marked with green authentication stamps, indicating variance within acceptable parameters. The casualty statistics display as modest cull, that reduced atmospheric consumption to sustainable levels while generating biomass credits, supplementing ration production for affected residential blocks. Accompanying notation renders the event in crisp Gothic script. Optimized atmospheric distribution through localized population density adjustment. No mention of asphyxiation, only optimization through blessed subtraction that calls itself mercy. The Ascent Lottery's true function emerges through archived documentation revealing manpower tithe mechanisms disguised as charitable opportunity. Data slates display detailed profiles of winners, selected not through chance, but systematic evaluation of debt-to-income ratios, productivity scores, and compliance records marking them as optimally suited for processing through Munitorum intake channels. Winners undergo conscription disguised as elevation, their families receiving compensation resembling death benefits, while beloved relatives serve the emperor in distant theaters where casualty rates exceed replacement capacity. Internal memoranda reveal systematic connections between respiratory infractions and accelerated draft eligibility, their margins annotated with calculations transforming compliance violations into recruitment opportunities. Citizens cited for respirator irregularities, atmospheric theft, or ration distribution fraud receive priority consideration for lottery participation, while debt accumulation creates economic pressure favoring military service over civilian penury. The system manufactures desperation, then offers escape through conscription that transforms survival economics into military recruitment with mathematical precision. Moral inversion operates through theological framework that redefines mercy as variance below projected casualties, while efficiency becomes human optimization through systematic processing. Adept Vex explains doctrine with mechanical satisfaction. Projected death rates establish baseline expectations. Actual casualties below projection represent divine mercy expressed through imperial protection. Casualties above projection indicate system failure, requiring corrective adjustment through enhanced enforcement. The mathematics sanctify brutalization as salvation while maintaining quotas that serve humanity's greater survival through calculated sacrifice. Clerk Designation Gamma 12 maintains personnel files documenting lottery processing with bureaucratic precision, his data slate displaying conscription statistics that transform human tragedy into administrative efficiency. Wall charts around his station display atmospheric optimization results across multiple residential blocks, their green annotations indicating successful population reduction improving air quality ratings while reducing competition for filtered atmosphere. He processes human suffering into statistical abstractions while maintaining ledgers that balance death against production with theological certainty. The clerk explains system theology through quote that encapsulates imperial arithmetic, his voice dry from years of filing reports that classify mass death as acceptable variance. The emperor's love is measured in acceptable losses. The phrase appears in margin notes throughout administrative documentation, its repetition creating doctrinal foundation that justifies systematic murder through mathematical necessity blessed by divine providence. Each life becomes data point, each death statistical adjustment, all serving grand impersonal design that transforms biological weakness into military strength. Calculation servitors process atmospheric allocation through algorithms treating human lives as computational variables, in equations balanced through systematic elimination. Their cogitator banks display optimization models projecting population reduction requirements across multiple scenarios. Increased warfront demands, reduced agricultural output, atmospheric processor maintenance schedules, industrial expansion programs. Each model generates casualty projections marked with Aquila authentication, while servoskulls transcribe results into archives bound with human skin. How do spire nobles justify systems that budget mass death? What does charity mean when air itself is currency? The answers lie higher, in perfumed atmosphere of aristocratic spires, where architects of this system dwell, insulated from direct consequences, yet utterly dependent upon brutal efficiency that transforms human breath into imperial resource through mathematical theology that calls systematic murder mercy. The mathematical theology that measures the emperor's love in acceptable losses finds its ultimate expression in spire palaces, where filtered atmosphere carries imported fragrances, and private gardens flourish under protective domes that shield noble lungs from industrial consequences of their own policies. Here, 17 levels above the administratum complex, where clocks calculate human worth, the architects of systematic brutalization breathe sweetened air while explaining their charitable intentions through doctrine that transforms mass murder into philanthropic necessity. Lady Celestine Vex Thane presides over her crystalline conservatory, where atmospheric processors hum with mechanical discretion, their blessed machinery purifying air through filtration systems that cost more than entire residential blocks consume in atmospheric credits annually. Exotic orchids bloom in soil imported from distant agri-worlds, while pollinating servo-cherubs drift through perfumed atmosphere that never carries the metallic tang of recycled breath or the sweet decay of corpse starch processing. The contrast is deliberate, a physical manifestation of power that transforms survival into luxury through technological separation. Tonight, her dome hosts an Ascent Gala, where silk-clad nobles sponsor elevation opportunities for deserving citizens selected through careful evaluation of debt ratios, productivity scores, and compliance records. Guests raise crystalline paddles, indicating financial commitment to programs that promise honor while delivering, processing through munitorum intake facilities, where mourning becomes martial dedication. Lady Vex Thane explains the initiative's noble purpose with voice modulated by throat microbe implants, her words transforming conscription pathways into charitable intervention blessed by divine mandate and social responsibility. Lord Commander Thaddeus Corvin articulates civic compact theology with practiced elegance, his gestures encompassing the industrial haze below while explaining necessary social architecture. The spire protects through wisdom and resources, masses produce through labor and sacrifice. Faith reconciles all contradictions through spiritual frameworks that transform exploitation into salvation. The doctrine operates with circular logic designed to resist questioning while sanctifying brutalization as mercy expressed through imperial protection and hierarchical necessity, serving humanity's greater survival. Philanthropic ventilators installed in Block Gamma 12 represent charity theatre, designed for picked capture rather than atmospheric improvement, their brass fittings gleaming during dedication ceremonies, while maintenance contracts remain deliberately unfunded through administrative oversight. The devices provide temporary relief photographed for noble consumption, while, creating dependency that increases desperation when inevitable breakdown occurs. Guests review footage showing grateful citizens breathing deeply from new vents, their faces momentarily free of usual grimace, while budget documentation reveals maintenance funding, terminated immediately after filming completion. Between speeches, young Scion Maximilian auctions under-Hive curiosities, collected through servants who purchase artifacts from reclamation processing. His collection includes atmospheric meters bearing guild authentication stamps, their brass dials frozen in perpetual insufficiency, and debt-tracking cogitators displaying final readings from processed families. Guests examine the devices with fascination reserved for exotic specimens, their conversation treating human desperation as aesthetic experience, while mechanical components become conversation pieces divorced from original function, serving imperial necessity. Yet even aristocratic privilege operates within system constraints that transform protection into prison through surveillance mechanisms, maintaining order through fear that penetrates every social stratum. Arbites maintain detailed files on charter houses, their black folders containing documentation of tithe compliance, loyalty demonstrations, and resource allocation efficiency ratings that treat hereditary titles as revocable privileges dependent upon quota maintenance. Noble immunity extends only to direct consequences, not systemic obligations that reduce aristocratic houses to statistical entries when production falls below acceptable parameters. Lord Corvin's eyes linger on sealed documentation bearing Aquila authentication, while explaining that oversight represents mutual protection rather than threat, though his nervous gestures suggest awareness that surveillance creates vulnerability rather than security. Tithe failure threatens hereditary positions through mechanisms that transform noble comfort into imperial demands, requiring systematic brutalization to maintain production quotas, feeding warfront consumption, exceeding planetary capacity through mathematical certainty. The spire gilds the machine, but cannot escape its logic, creating conditions where aristocrats become prisoners of systems they designed for controlling others, while maintaining appearances that transform terror into etiquette through social protocols blessed by necessity. Fear drives policy, even at the apex, through calculations that weigh noble comfort against imperial demands, their atmospheric processes drawing from the same industrial systems that poison residential air, only earlier in the cascade and better maintained. Conversation flows around topics that treat human lives as production variables, requiring optimization through calculated reduction, their syllables dancing through filtration systems that purify noble breath while authorizing systematic suffocation through bureaucratic efficiency, maintaining social distance between decision and consequence. What grows in the system's neglected spaces, where surveillance cannot penetrate and charitable intervention fails to reach? When hope becomes conscription and elevation transforms into processing, what do the hopeless choose when survival demands alternatives to systematic elimination disguised as opportunity? The hopeless choose alternatives that grow in the system's neglected spaces, where perfumed charity cannot reach and audit servitors cannot pass whispered syllables. In maintenance tunnels beneath Theta's ruins, in sump galleries slick with chemical rain, in crawl spaces skirting the lift wells where gaskets once sealed death away, systematic oppression breeds resistance movements that transform imperial brutalization into recruitment opportunity for entities offering dignity through transgression and literal ascension beyond administrative control. Oppression follows pathology, with recognizable stages that create optimal conditions for ideological infection. Scarcity narrows time horizons until survival becomes the only calculation. Humiliation through compliance audits and atmospheric infractions teaches that worth remains conditional on metrics designed to ensure failure. Ritualized suffering through incense hours that steal oxygen and penance shifts that extract sleep enforces endurance as highest virtue, while demonstrating that pain serves imperial necessity rather than human dignity. Into this systematic degradation walk recruiters offering inverse catechism, power through refusal, belonging through transgression, breath as birthright rather than purchase. Chaos cells market themselves as moral correction to immoral algorithms, their pamphlets using the state's language of purification while inverting the object requiring cleansing. The Crimson Path spreads through survivors who witnessed purge protocols, transform protection into elimination, while authorities classified mass death as acceptable variants blessed by providence. Their scarred hands trace symbols, inverting Aquila iconography, seeking agency within systems designed to eliminate choice through mathematical precision. Devotional circles that once recited standard litanies now whisper names that burn the tongue, their ceremonies transforming starvation into spiritual discipline, chosen rather than imposed through atmospheric taxation. Genestealer infiltration operates through different methodology, offering true family connections that transcend artificial scarcity while promising literal ascension to star gods, whose love manifests through biological transformation rather than acceptable losses calculated through administrative efficiency. The cult provides material assistance through networks smuggling food, medicine, and atmospheric equipment while building loyalty through genuine care, contrasting sharply with imperial charity theater designed for noble consumption rather than citizen survival. Case studies reveal systematic patterns where imperial control mechanisms create recruitment pools with mathematical precision. The Weeping Saints emerged from Block Gamma 9 after atmospheric purge eliminated 30% of residents. Their grief transformed into rage, channeled toward rituals promising reunion with lost family members through death voluntarily chosen rather than systematically imposed through bureaucratic variants. Maintenance Crew 42A demonstrates conversion pathway from loyal service to Xenos collaboration, their knowledge of ventilation systems making them invaluable courier network, while their desperation from systematic component theft creates motivation for cooperation with forces offering genuine material assistance. Control responses escalate through predictable patterns that breed adaptation while justifying increased repression through circular logic designed to maintain stability through systematic brutalization, disguised as protection from threats the system itself manufactures. Ministorum penance intensification drives citizens toward alternatives, offering spiritual frameworks that acknowledge suffering, without sanctifying it as divine necessity, requiring acceptance through faith rather than resistance through action. Arbite's sting operations result in mass arrests separating families, while creating martyrs whose sacrifice inspires additional recruitment through networks providing material assistance to affected households. Enforcer disappearances represent escalation, where systematic corruption creates opportunities for cult infiltration through personnel, whose loyalty erodes under pressure from quotas requiring specific violation rates regardless of actual infractions, while compensation remains insufficient for survival, without supplemental income from sources operating outside official channels. Missing officers provide intelligence, while their equipment feeds black markets supplying resistance movements, with tools necessary for expanded operations. Each countermeasure works exactly once before cells fragment, rebrand, alter prayer lexicons, and shift to children as couriers, because adults face surveillance. Critical payoff emerges through analysis revealing Theta's panic corridors match cult recruitment patterns with mathematical precision. Post-purge recruitment rates along stampede routes climbed 37% within 2 weeks, meeting points occurring where crowds jammed and time stretched thin, under coin-fed emergency vents that never unjammed, beside shrines patched with foil in service crawls where adults turned back and children continued forward. The machine prints diagrams of its own sabotage while filing results as Munitorum memoranda, documenting variance within acceptable parameters. The hidden cost operates through recognition that Hive survival logic creates the very threats it claims to prevent, breeding resistance movements that threaten Imperial control while providing justification for increased extraction through security measures, requiring expanded enforcement apparatus, consuming resources that might otherwise address underlying conditions, creating recruitment opportunities for hostile entities. A world feeds wars. It simultaneously incubates against itself through compression that makes labor efficient while making radicalization efficient, ducts that feed manufactoria, while moving contraband doctrine, purges that prove the state can decide who breathes while proving breath remains negotiable. Marta surveys empty sleeping spaces where neighbors once arranged bedding according to ministorum regulation, their absence creating additional room while reducing competition for atmospheric resources. She breathes easier through filters that no longer strain against demand. Though improvement tastes of metal and carries undertones, families learn not to question. Between corrugated walls, she notices subtle shifts, whispers of family offering true belonging, symbols scrawled in chalk promising something beyond endless grind, furtive meetings where citizens speak of ascension transcending the Emperor's stars, rather than leading to processing facilities where mourning becomes martial dedication. How does a world feed wars it simultaneously incubates against itself through systematic alienation that turns suffering into weapons wielded by those seeking to dismantle imperial foundations? What does ascension mean at Munitorum intake facilities, where lottery winners undergo processing, transforming grief into military service, while maintaining recruitment quotas through systematic elimination disguised as charitable opportunity? The answers emerge through examination of conscription systems that convert resistance into military service, while maintaining control through promises of elevation whose true destination remains classified beyond citizen access levels. The resistance movements growing in neglected spaces find their answer in Muster Square Gamma 7, where harsh sodium illumination strips shadows from ferrocrete platforms designed for processing human lives into military resources with industrial efficiency. Under lights that never dim, Intake servitors roll along maintenance tracks, while families witness ascent lottery winners, processed through military induction that transforms charitable elevation into systematic conscription disguised as imperial opportunity. Here, the final payoff reveals itself through machinery that stamps flesh whilst calling systematic drafting voluntary service. Marta stands among families clutching identification tokens, bearing debt-tracking codes and compliance ratings, her presence required for witnessing ceremonies that transform loved ones into imperial property through ritualized processing, blessed by theological necessity. The lottery operates as conscription pipeline with mechanical precision, its winners selected through systematic evaluation of respirator violations, debt accumulation ratios, and purge survival statistics rather than chance, while maintaining appearance of charitable opportunity sanctified by providence and social mobility. Intake servitors work with augmetic efficiency, their piston limbs hissing while brand irons warm in induction cradles designed for marking human flesh with regimental designations that outlast uniforms and identify processed citizens as imperial property. Each conscript receives scarification, marking them as military resources, while data slates record family compensation resembling death benefits disguised as service bonuses calculated to clear partial debt rather than provide genuine economic relief. Names appear on illuminated boards through algorithms calculating optimal recruitment based on atmospheric infractions and medical arrears that place Theta survivors at list tops with predictable precision. Citizens cited for respirator irregularities receive priority consideration, while families carrying guild store debt face accelerated processing through systems designed to convert economic desperation into military service. Marta recognizes faces from her Hab block, their survival of atmospheric purge, marking them as suitable for processing rather than worthy of preservation. Munitorum officer designation, Kappa 9, speaks of honor, while processing conscripts through intake stations equipped with flesh stampers and loyalty verification apparatus, his words transforming systematic drafting into noble sacrifice blessed by imperial necessity, serving humanity's greater survival. Mothers calculate script advances that will never clear family ledgers, their mathematical desperation creating conditions where military service represents economic relief rather than patriotic duty, while maintaining documentation of willing participation. The economics operate through coercion disguised as opportunity. Families sign consent slates releasing claims to conscripted relatives while receiving compensation calculated to cover outstanding atmospheric fines and medical debts for limited periods before interest accumulation resumes. The advance stabilizes heir accounts temporarily while ensuring continued dependence on systems that treat survival as conditional privilege rather than inherent right. Conscripts from Theta stand beside Spire volunteers in processing queues that briefly equalize class distinctions through uniform distribution before immediately re-stratifying participants through posting assignments reflecting social origin rather than military aptitude. Under Hive survivors receive assignment to penal legions and hazardous duty battalions, while aristocratic scions enter officer candidate programs, offering survival rates approaching statistical certainty. Class hierarchy persists through administrative sorting that maintains privilege while consuming flesh with mathematical precision. Documents reveal the logistical loop operating with perfect efficiency through population management that serves multiple imperial quotas simultaneously. The hive sheds, mouths requiring feeding, while providing bodies serving imperial campaigns, where casualty rates create continuous demand for replacement personnel. Conscription removes surplus citizens, while generating manpower serving distant theaters, where survival approaches zero through mathematical inevitability, creating recruitment cycles that operate with theological precision. Administratum ledgers display perfect equilibrium, achieved through systematic processing that converts overpopulation into military resources while maintaining production quotas through reduced competition for atmospheric allocation and ration distribution. Reclamation Protocol credited supplemental meal units from Theta's dead, while Ascent Alignment processes survivors to consume those rations elsewhere, under other skies, where their consumption becomes part of different ledgers, balanced by attrition forecasts rather than purge statistics. Transport vessels wait beyond the muster square, with holds designed for human cargo rather than passenger comfort, their destinations classified beyond citizen access, while manifests indicate one-way journeys to processing facilities, where conscripts undergo final transformation from individuals into military resources. The ships depart with mechanical regularity, their schedules timed to purge cycles and debt collection periods that create optimal recruitment conditions through systematic desperation. Marta signs consent slates for transport designation she does not recognize, while calculating whether scrip advances cover atmospheric arrears accumulated through compliance violations and medical expenses purchased on credit. The officer calls it proud posting, while documentation calls it route number, leading to theaters where an expectation measurement occurs through ranges rather than meters, where breath becomes tactical consideration rather than purchased privilege. The machine achieves perfect balance through systematic consumption that transforms human lives into statistical abstractions while maintaining documentation of voluntary participation blessed by imperial necessity. Citizens become soldiers, become casualties, become recruitment quotas requiring additional processing through cycles that operate with divine precision disguised as military necessity, serving humanity's greater survival through acceptable losses calculated by authorities who breathe perfumed air while authorizing systematic suffocation. Family units watch processing with resignation born from systematic conditioning that transforms resistance into compliance through economic pressure and spiritual frameworks sanctifying sacrifice as imperial duty. They witness elevation that leads to processing facilities where mourning becomes martial dedication, serving imperial hunger, consuming worlds, while calling systematic brutalization mercy expressed through mathematical theology, measuring the emperor's love in acceptable losses. If assent is conscription and breath is taxed, what constitutes freedom within systems designed to eliminate choice through mathematical precision, disguised as charitable opportunity blessed by providence? Return to the counting machine, where children rehearse litanies while meters tick toward zero, and mothers calculate whether families can afford to breathe through the night, while the machine consumes its children and calls it victory through accounting that transforms systematic murder into strategic necessity, serving imperial campaigns requiring continuous replacement through recruitment cycles that never end. The transport vessels disappear beyond atmospheric processors with their human cargo, while the respirator meter in Hab Block Gamma 7 continues its mechanical count in a room grown emptier through systematic processing, disguised as charitable elevation. The brass dial face displays numbers in Gothic script with familiar precision, though fewer fingers touch its worn surface, and fewer voices join the mourning chorus that once echoed through narrow corridors. The child who rehearsed intake litanies now sits alone on threadbare matting, her understanding transformed through witnessing that revealed conscription pipelines beneath promises of ascension. She recites the words with comprehension, born from observation rather than rote memorization. By his grace, I breathe. By his will, I labor. By his might, I survive. Each syllable carries weight beyond theological instruction, revealing breath as imperial levy, collected through coin-fed dispensers, while labor serves quotas calculated in distant offices, where clerks measure the emperor's love in acceptable losses. The litany becomes confession of systematic extraction disguised as divine protection, its rhythm matching the meter's mechanical tick toward zero. The complete systemic arc reveals itself through synthesis, connecting engineered scarcity with imperial quotas, control ritualized as salvation, survival taxed through black markets exploiting desperation, despair weaponized by resistance movements, offerings transgression as dignity, and hope monetized as military service through conscription pipelines disguised as charitable opportunity. Each component operates with mechanical precision, while maintaining documentation of voluntary participation, blessed by theological necessity, serving humanity's greater survival through calculated elimination. Maintenance Crew 42A's traded gaskets created controlled failure points that transformed Ashfall Purge Day from protection into elimination, while authorities classified mass death as acceptable variance within budgeted parameters. Gang taxation extracted value from desperation, while official systems demanded compliance regardless of capacity. Debt spiral mechanics tightened around families choosing between breathing and eating, while mechanical systems failed through component theft driven by starvation that served recruitment quotas through systematic alienation. Macro perspective reveals this hive as typical rather than aberrant, its systematic brutalization replicated across thousands of worlds, where atmospheric processors struggle against industrial poisons, while populations compress into vertical cities designed for extraction efficiency rather than human dignity. The mathematics scale with predictable precision. Increased warfront demands require expanded conscription. Expanded conscription necessitates population surplus. Population surplus demands resource optimization through calculated reduction disguised as purification, blessed by providence. Final comprehension emerges through recognition that ashfall purges, purity audits, and ascent lotteries represent load-bearing control systems rather than safety mechanisms protecting citizens from environmental hazards or social mobility opportunities. These mechanisms operate as integral architecture within systems designed to extract maximum value from human desperation. The purges eliminate surplus population while generating biomass credits. The audits create violation records, justifying conscription processing. The lotteries convert economic desperation into military recruitment, while maintaining appearance of imperial charity. The system works precisely as intended, its purpose not human well-being, but Imperial continuity, achieved through efficient conversion of flesh and despair into munitions and manpower. Occasional malfunctions like Theta's catastrophic purge represent rebalancing rather than failure. Necessary culling, ensuring long-term viability of extraction machinery that treats human lives as production variables, requiring optimization through systematic processing. Marta surveys sleeping spaces where neighbors once arranged bedding according to ministorum regulation, their absence creating additional room that improves atmospheric distribution while reducing competition for filtered air. She breathes easier through systems no longer strained by demand, though improvement carries metallic taste and chemical undertones that families learn not to question. With foil torn from ration packaging, she patches respirator cracks while counting script tokens against tomorrow's breathing budget that never balances in her favor. The mathematics compound through interest, calculated by machine spirits programmed for extraction rather than survival. She awaits the next siren with resignation, born from systematic conditioning that transforms resistance into compliance through economic pressure and spiritual frameworks sanctifying sacrifice as imperial duty. Her endurance represents victory within systems designed to eliminate choice through mathematical precision disguised as charitable opportunity blessed by providence. This is why you never want to live on a hive world. Here, survival operates through taxation, collected while authorities classify mass death as theological necessity. Hope transforms into conscription-serving imperial campaigns, where casualty rates create continuous recruitment demand. Air becomes currency, dispensed through meters, while industrial processes poison atmosphere they purify. The machine has eternity to grind human lives into statistical abstractions, while maintaining documentation of voluntary participation. It breathes with mechanical satisfaction while citizens suffocate through systematic extraction, counting with computational precision while families calculate whether they can afford another day, processing with industrial efficiency while calling systematic murder mercy expressed through mathematical theology. The respirator meter ticks toward zero while the child practices tomorrow's litany, and 18 billion souls endure compression into vertical warehouses, reaching toward poisoned skies. The red bead advances, the machine endures, the counting continues,